Good morning and welcome to another fireside chat on a topic that's very close to my heart, which is around account scoring and how we can use account scoring for territory planning. And for those of you who are probably listening to us the first time, we at Forecast are committed to building a platform for end to end that takes allows sales strategy folks to sort of take that strategy and make it actionable and operationalize the entire RevOps stack. So today we are supporting customers like MongoDB, Auth0, Udemy, and a bunch of other fast-growing companies. And one of the things that does come up when we talk about sales strategy is account scoring, right? Account scoring for the purpose of territory planning. So we worked with Noor, and I'll allow Noor Atari to introduce himself, share a bit of his background, and then we can dive right into this rich topic of account scoring. I think Noor is way more passionate than us, but Noor, over to you.
All right. Thank you so much. Hey guys, this is Noor Atari. As Armesh mentioned, I've been doing account scoring for quite some time. I started out in the world of working at Salesforce and Google and kind of doing it at a company level, and really has seen all flavors. I've done probably too many territory carving and account scoring exercises. But after that, I actually started my own company that does account scoring, has productized these learnings into something that is scalable. It's called AccountSpark. And yeah, this is an area of deep passion for me. So happy to talk to you guys about that.
So Noor, as you think about account scoring, right? Because what I've seen is the definition is a little broad, and it starts with, okay, are we doing lead scoring? Are we doing an opportunity scoring? How different is that from account scoring? So do you have any thoughts on that? Like, what is your definition of account scoring?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think, for me, first of all, there's a field of the scoring exercise, right? Which is to kind of look at a metric, to look at something that's important to people that we measure and use data to be able to inform that. So I think you think about the funnel, right? And there's things like lead scoring. Well, that's a small portion of the population of accounts or folks, individuals, contacts that are interested in your product. So that's obviously, a lot of key players there. It's really important to do that because whatever comes in through your website, you want to be able to have an intelligent kind of prediction of what that could lead into, which ones are high value returns. Then you kind of go down the funnel a little bit, and things have been kind of solidified, and leads have been converted into opportunities. Sales rep has touched them or validated them, and then they have a lot of companies that do opportunity scoring and say, hey, from the opportunities in my pipeline, which ones are likely to kind of close and convert into business for me? And that's obviously really important. When I think about account scoring, it's actually zooming out a little bit and saying, what is the world that I can go after? If I am thinking about my go-to-market and which accounts I want to go after, and which companies make sense. Some of them could have no leads, no opportunities, no close. They're not customers, no closed won business. So the world of account scoring, when I define it, is to kind of take a look at the firmographics of what's out there and identify which ones are more closely aligned with your go-to-market, and being able to kind of use data to help, and human judgment to help inform decision-making that goes into that space.
So do you think about taking input from, say, a lead scoring system somebody might have put together? I create an account score, but I still want to look at lead and opportunity score as input to build an account score.
Absolutely. I mean, I think you have to. There's a world of data that's captured in our CRM systems, right? Our customer relationship management systems. And so, part of it is something like a lead score, which tells us that this account has had some leads on it. These are the contacts associated with it that have expressed interest. That's certainly an important component of identifying what, the ultimate, score for the account would be. Similarly for the opportunity side of things, right? When you look at accounts where there are opportunities associated with it, so an opportunity score would become a very good leading indicator of what could actually happen down the road. So certainly, I think that's a really good kind of point of lead scoring and account scoring, and opportunity scoring really do feed into the process of doing a good account score.
So why do companies struggle with this? I mean, we have seen when you were at Salesforce as well, right? I don't know how many discussions we had around bookings potential and how it's calculated. And, we will come out of the number and the field will always argue against that number, right? So sometimes people just think, okay, it's a simple machine learning problem. I have all this data. I'm going to apply machine learning and get away with it. Why have some people struggled with this?
Yeah, I think I'd say two things. One is just sheer data volume, right? So lead scoring is, a smaller proportion of the population that have expressed interest. Opportunities are even less, right? When you're talking about account scoring, I mean, I think according to Duns and Bradstreet, there's 18.8 million accounts in North America alone, right? So when you talk about that, that's kind of, I think the sheer volume of the accounts can make, a somewhat conceptually simple problem into something that's kind of operationally difficult to do, and that then ties back to the strategy. So I was going to say, even probably similar to that same point of data, volume is just even data quality, right? So one of the big things is you're looking at accounts, oftentimes sales leaders, marketing leaders that you're supporting, they're going to say, hey, well, I can't use this information because this is not meaningful. And a handful of kind of bad examples kind of break the rule for everybody else. I think that the second big thing for me that I believe is a problem is there's kind of a technological gap, I would say, in terms of, the folks that are trying to deliver and consume this information about account scoring and, and the actual steps that would be required to produce something that is scalable and usable. And that's kind of where I think technology needs to kind of step up and really help operationalize that, I'd say. So those are the two things, kind of data volumes and data quality goes with it, and then probably being able to really have the technology to kind of enable a good strategy.
So I think let's focus on the first two pieces that you mentioned, right? Data volume and data quality, right? A lot of it is, I think volume is definitely one aspect, but data quality, we know has always been an issue that kind of trips account scoring. If it's Salesforce is notorious for data quality issues. So when you build an account score, do you run into issues where people say, I don't trust this score? So how do you kind of address that notion of trust? Because that's important for sales strategy people when they're being able to communicate that no, we've got this right, we've done this the right way. How do you sort of think about that?
Yeah, no, I think I'll tell you a funny story, and then I'll kind of use that to hopefully explain some of the challenges that I've seen in this space. But when I was at Google, I was supporting I was introducing this metric of doing kind of an account score for their Google for Work division at that time, which is now currently the Google Cloud Platform. And we were there, and I introduced this metric. I had a big presentation. I'd done all my homework, and I started showing kind of a list of potential. It was in dollar value of what the account scores are, and you can kind of see for each territory what it is. I wasn't as emotional. Then they wanted to ask me, what are the next top 20 kind of prospects that we can go after based off of this account score? So I had a slide that showcased that, and one of them that came up there was Kodak, which was going out of business. And I remember just truly like the one example of an account where they saw that and they're like, dude, it's going out of business. Clearly your model doesn't know what's going on, in terms of the kind of walking the hallways or, the situation that's there. So that was a big, it was definitely met with a lot of pushback saying, hey, our data quality in many cases is really poor. Sometimes like Walmart will appear as, a lot bigger or smaller as a number of employees than it really is. So I've definitely had a lot of these things kind of come up and brought to my attention as problems in this space. And the interesting thing I learned a lot from the example at Google, where I kind of stepped back. I realized that this presentation, I'm not going to win them over in this meeting. I made a mistake, which was that I probably should review the numbers and data, and really approach it with the team more collaboratively before trying to present it to an executive audience saying, here's your numbers, right? So ended up taking the advice of like kind of walking the hallways and talking to the individual reps. I spoke to the account manager for Kodak, and I said, "Hey, this is the kind of prediction engine that we came up with, and what do you think of the potential here that's coming out with Kodak?" And he said, Noor, what's really interesting here is that Kodak is going out of business, and so for them, they would be looking for things that could be cost-saving measures, and so actually it could be an interesting opportunity. And so using that feedback and really working with the reps and the managers on it, and then coming back and presenting it, was kind of my solution to this, approach. And in doing that, it just so happened that I think about 4 months later, they ended up closing a deal with Kodak that was very similar to the kind of predicted score. That was pure luck, right? But it really taught me something that, one, it's really the marriage of like human judgment with data, and it can't be one or the other. You have to kind of work collaboratively with each other. And our stakeholders, they're looking for us in terms of being able to provide some kind of analytical insight in some ways, but they also want that business judgment. They want their business judgment and our own as well, from kind of experience. If certain competitors come up, to the list, then we have to identify those. And so there's going to be always shortcomings of each kind of the models, but I think the best way to kind of combat when people feel like the data maybe is not accurate or they kind of challenge it, is to try to accept that challenge and say, hey, you know what? You're right. Let me hear about your feedback. What is it that is important to you? Why do you feel like this is kind of a problem? Is it data quality? What's the things? And where we know there's like suspect data quality, being able to kind of separate those outliers from the bulk of the population, where you maybe can make kind of more intelligent conclusions. So 80% of the population that is more accurate and kind of really ready for us to do account scoring on. So being able to separate those things and really working collaboratively, let's say, with your stakeholders, can help you get past the data quality issues.
So apart from data quality, so that's like first thing is couple. I totally agree with you. This is there's definitely the data quality issues in terms of like are we talking about the right accounts? Do you have the right universe of accounts? How many duplicates do we have? People create accounts with different names, right? So there's just a hierarchy of accounts that we need to sort of clean up. Along with that, firmographic information that needs to get validated, and sometimes these data sources that people think they're going to bring in are mostly out of date, at least 6 months. And so having some means for including feedback from the field to inform data quality is super interesting. But you can't do that for every account, right? Like you said, 18 million accounts just in the US, right? So as you think about it at scale for a company, right, how do you recommend them handling this process, right? Do you do account scoring for the entire universe, or do you do account scoring for, like, how do you see that playing out effectively if someone says, crawl, walk, run approach that we're going to take rolling out account scoring now in our organization? Here is how we will go about that.
Yeah. That's a good point. I like that. So my motto is kind of what you said actually there, but my motto is 3 things: is simplify, solve, then scale. Right. I think when I think about account scoring and how to kind of truly operationalize it, I think we sometimes tend to overcomplicate the problem and say, what I really want to know is I want to kind of carve territories where for the scoring of the territory of the account, I can look at, maybe if it's a customer or not, or the amount of pipeline produced in the territory. So there's a lot of different things that can go into something like this. And, I've seen approaches before in the early days of Salesforce where, folks were like, well, to really come up with a good account score, we should look at these 300 metrics, right? And have a machine tell us which ones are kind of more telling. And we ended up doing I ended up painfully doing a lot of regressions and different analyses and coming back and saying, it looks like it's really a handful of things, right? That for that business made sense. It was actually 4 things I think that were the most indicative for that. So I would always say the most important thing is to really just try to simplify as much as possible and not, oversimplify, but not also overcomplicate it. I like the Einstein quote of you can't explain something simply, you don't know it well enough, right? So I think that's an important piece, is to simplify it. And then I do think that the kind of first go around as you go through things is to try to solve it. And like I said in the kind of Google example of the Kodak one, once you solve it, there's a lot of socializing that needs to happen in terms of solving that problem. Is, hey, what do you guys really think is this kind of version 1 of this prediction that we came up with, account score? And be open to feedback. These are your stakeholders. They're leaders for a reason. They have a strong opinion. You need to kind of capture their intent and truly try to use that in your prediction models. And then you can iterate on it. And then last thing, like I said, is scale. And that's probably the most important one, in my opinion, because once you have a solution that could work, really the problem is about how to do something that's scalable. And that's where technology fits in, is where it kind of a variety of players can really help. But, like you were mentioning with data quality, for example, things are so dynamic. You might have duplicates. You might have accounts that are being created. So having something that lives in spreadsheets, it doesn't work. You can't do that. You have to have something that is a more scalable platform that can allow you to kind of truly go through, and whether it's scoring or other kind of things that are part of the strategy and operations realm, you have to have something that can truly allow you to continue to work through it over time and get better and better at it. So that's kind of been my motto of how to try to tackle this problem.
So on that one, I think I would love for you to sort of dig in a little deeper into what you just said. Most places that I've seen, territory managers, territory planners, quota managers, right? They are doing work in an Excel spreadsheet, and they are doing some sort of scoring because they get a complete SAM or SAM analysis that they'll do. They'll put some score based on their own internal data to usage or whatever metrics that they might have, right? But they do it in an Excel spreadsheet. And you just said that it is not the scalable way to do this right is not to do this in an Excel spreadsheet, right? So why would you say that? Like, why do you think that it doesn't work doing it in an Excel spreadsheet?
Yeah. So I'll give you something. That's a good point. I'll give you some examples of something. Obviously, as part of the product that we offer, we do a lot of work with different customers to do account scoring. So you think about 18.8 million accounts, and if you have multiple products, and you have to do kind of a score for each product, you're talking about millions and millions of records. And first of all, Excel is not designed to handle that, right? I think for, I was describing this simplify, solve, and scale. For the solve piece, when you try and really figure out the kind of formulation, it's okay to do that in Excel, because you're just trying to kind of figure out, you're jotting your ideas down, you're trying different factors and variables. But the challenge that I see, this is why scaling is so important, and probably Excel is not going to work in this sense, is that, when you have these kind of things and these formulations, you're always asked to update it. Say, okay, this is great. I love what you did here. Can we now do it differently, right? And if you try to manipulate that in Excel, it just becomes, not bearable, basically. And the performance is so slow that you haven't trained anything to kind of come up with that prediction almost of it. So it becomes a lot of rework, and that's when it becomes real late hours. And, I feel like there's a lot of burnout on the team in doing it this way. But if you have a platform that can truly kind of capture the intent of, well, what we're doing is we're using a multiplier for pipeline, a multiplier for previous purchases that they made. If you can train a program to kind of do that analysis and then always be live, then the biggest issue that we often face is like kind of the freshness of the data. Like, this is really good, but now it's stale because this was done about a year ago. So having something where it's dynamic is really important, and it's difficult to do that, I'd say, because of the volume, because of other things, and people don't. Sales teams work in spreadsheets as well. So that's probably part of the complexity that goes into it.
Yeah, I think I completely concur with you, because I've seen most of these exercises fail because it's done in Excel spreadsheet for those very, very reasons. Scale, which is like, I've got so many accounts that I really can't, compute the number of different permutations that I might want in a simple Excel spreadsheet. No matter what permutation I do, people always have an opinion. So I need to get feedback from the field, change my inputs. Very hard to sort of track and put those field inputs as they're coming in an Excel sheet. And then once it's all done, being able to communicate that back, right? So yes, the one part over here when you do with account scoring is trust, right? It breaks trust around. So like when we are doing carving of territories, the first thing that my people want to know is like, how did you carve? And then we have, what I'm telling you that I carved in this way, and this is a good balance of customers and prospects, and these are the prospects that you should go after. That data, if I can't share with the rep, my account scoring model has actually lost all credibility. So that's the very reason why I think we propose that in account scoring should be in a platform, not in an Excel sheet.
Yeah.
I think I agree with you.
I was going to add something real fast to that, Ramesh. With trust is a really good point. I think, it's very easy to break that trust, unfortunately, right? So you look at an account and you notice a data quality issue. And if it is in a spreadsheet and you've done your prediction of account score there, then it lives in that spreadsheet. But if you were to correct, if sales operations or someone were to correct that, hey, you know what, this account has actually a lot more employees, that obviously should be an input for, your prediction. So if someone sees that and they say, hey, the potential here seems absurd, right? Then they've lost trust. But if they identify it's because of data quality issue and that data quality issue gets resolved, and all of a sudden the metric itself of a score gets kind of refreshed, then you've kind of retained that trust. So I think it's kind of an important piece to it.
Yeah, and I think that's and the reason is that I think that we all know change is constant, right? So like COVID happened right now. Some companies, some sectors have completely gotten hit. Now, in the absence of a feedback loop coming in from the field, which is being captured, it's very hard to update a score in an Excel spreadsheet. But if I have a rep that says, look, this company has laid off so many people, the data is getting entered in some place, and we stuck the data into a platform where we can constantly kind of monitor every quarter the score and reallocate and rebalance. That would be great, right? That to me is where you would build a good feedback loop. So there have been companies out there that have been trying to solve this account scoring problem, right? So we know Mentigo, we know Lattice Engine, we know a bunch of other companies that have been trying to do scoring.
Yeah.
Not very effectively, in my view, at least. So where do you see them failing? And are there lessons from their experience that you've taken? Or first, have you evaluated and looked at them? And what is your lens on them?
Yeah, I think I'll give you an example of something like a Mattermark, right? That does a Mattermark score for accounts to go after. I think, if I put myself in the shoes of a sales strategy and operations person, a leader in an organization, considering something like that. So, great company, but the biggest failing, first of all, is that it's not usually localized to my business. So what do you know about what I have done in the past, right? So you think about Mattermark, they come up with a Mattermark score and say, hey, you know what? Microsoft is financially very strong, so therefore it's a great, good company to go after. Maybe, but have you looked at the go-to-market for this particular company? Are they a competitor of this customer that you're talking to, or for the type of product that they or the kind of spend that they have, their IT budget, for example, does it make sense for yours, for your company? I think one of the biggest challenges is that it's not usually localized towards that piece. Two is a lot of companies, I feel like there was a bandwagon about lead scoring, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and a lot of companies jumped on that bandwagon, and that has its own kind of challenges, but not as many have gone into account scoring. Mostly because of the data volume issues I was mentioning before, and kind of some of the approaches that, maybe there's a little bit of a knowledge thing as well, like I said. So I think that's some of the failings that I've seen in that space, is that the companies that have gone through it have either treated it as a consultancy as well. I've seen that a lot as well, where it's a consultancy service. And really, I think one of the more important things is about scalability. So making a platform to allow people to kind of put their learnings and then be able to kind of make these changes and have it be dynamic. That's the biggest part where not a lot of companies have tackled that well.
I think that's my vision as well, like for forecast and on our platform when we do territory planning, for example, right? I have this view that territory planning, the way it's done is very archaic, right? We pick up an arbitrary number, whether it's employee size, named account, strategic geo, whatever it is, right? So we create a hierarchy, we put accounts over there, and we put coverage, right? Uh, but the reality is, my job as a sales strategist, sales ops person, is to give optimal coverage, right? Putting the best person on the best account potential, which means I need some sort of scoring in the app that allows me to say, you know, this customer that probably is a mid-market customer is a better person, better fit than your current customer that is in an enterprise account, because so you want to move segments over, and that kind of early warning alerting is where I think scoring can really help in building a more dynamic territory plan. Can be being executed against, but also when we're making those changes, being able to sort of communicate to the rep and telling them, here is why. Going back to the trust issue, this is the score, this is how we build the score, right? So now, I think we are completely in alignment over there. So as you have worked with customers, right, and so even at Salesforce, Google, and then now you've been working as a consultant with a bunch of other companies on account scoring models. What is you talked about them about simplifying, making it repeatable before you make it scalable. Uh, what do you recommend doing the scoring for all accounts, or do you say, well, let's take a rule of 80-20 that works, right? Because there's certain accounts where a rep knows better than anybody else. So how do you recommend? How have you seen the problem being solved?
Yeah. So yeah, I hear you. I think, if you follow that kind of logic of simplify, solve, and scale, I would always say that if possible, if you have the platform to do it, you should, if you're using a product, you should do something where you do score it for all accounts, because I think in doing that, you would kind of see the shortcomings of where it's breaking, where it's directionally accurate, where it's not. So I think there's a lot of learnings in being able to say, hey, you know what, for some of these smaller accounts, 1 to 10 employee companies, maybe this predictive engine isn't as strong here. So knowing your shortcomings is important, especially if you have that scale. If you are kind of in the early phases where you're still trying to just do account scoring in spreadsheets or other kind of techniques, I think then you really have to kind of pick and choose your battles. And I would probably go back to the whole simplify thing. And what I've seen there is that there's really a few indicators that tend to be very indicative of purchasing behavior. Things like industry, market segment, and region. Those are the three kind of big pillars that I've learned in my kind of days of doing this stuff that tend to really kind of shape customer purchasing behavior. And so, and a lot of the analysis that I've done is kind of like a cohort analysis where I look at those three metrics of industry, region, and market segment and saying, what can we make conclusions about how this cohort behaves, as long as there's kind of a critical threshold of accounts. So meaning that, let's say you're looking at Walt Disney. Walt Disney is in media and entertainment. It is an enterprise account based in California. If you don't, as your company, you're looking through the data, if there isn't maybe a certain threshold, like 20 closed won deals in that same cohort of media entertainment, enterprise California, then you should zoom out and say, hey, well, let me look at all media entertainment accounts, for example, in North America, and see if I can make conclusions off of that. That type of kind of cohort level of analysis can be really, really helpful in being able to kind of identify what a reasonable score is, and maybe limiting your predictions to the cohorts where you have at least a certain critical threshold of accounts could be a good starting point. But again, if you have the technology to scale it, I would always highlight you should do it for all accounts, because that is truly where you get predictions like SAM, like a serviceable addressable market size, and things like that, where you can truly understand what your go-to-market is and where those gaps and not. And so you have to be kind of exhaustive in your approaches to do that. And that's why technology can be really crucial in that space.
Excellent. So yeah, what you also said is that there are certain accounts that you probably do the analysis for all, but leave them still out for feedback from the field, and there are others that you can say, what, you have enough of a portfolio that either way you raise a slice and dice, you still have an opportunity to make money. Yeah, it may not be 100% perfect, but it's a red one of an account score that allows a rep better visibility than having none at all, right?
Yeah, that's a good point, actually, because I think one of the things that we're doing as well kind of from a programmatic perspective is saying, you know what, reps don't look at all these accounts, but when they do look at an account, give us your feedback. Right? You're the expert. So does this prediction look good or not good? And then being able to use that to reinforce machine learning and saying, you know what, this looks like it's actually working well. These are the set of accounts where people gave a thumbs up to it, right? And so you're right. Like there's a lot of kind of shared knowledge out there, and being able to take that rep feedback and incorporating that in predictions is probably the next phase of how you improve the accuracy and the kind of trust that you're trying to build with the end users.
So if a company that engages you today, right, and they say, help us with account scoring, what would be the first things that you'll ask of them, or you'll say, just to set the context for them, right? That they find success. Like, how would you scope things out? What will be? How would you sort of put a roadmap for account scoring for them?
Yeah, so I think there's two things I always focus on. It's kind of time and value to them, right? So, and when I look for kind of customers I want to work with, it's people that understand both of those reasonably well. I think whenever you have traditionally, a lot of the things that we do for, let's say, territory planning, this happens so close to the end of the year around the fiscal planning process. It just kind of causes this huge time crunch. And what I've seen is that customers need to kind of go through this emotional journey, right? Of like, doubting it, maybe then accepting it, and kind of you have to be walk through this kind of process of like, let's go through this metric and really make sense out of it. So I think that is one big one. Where what's your timeline? Like when do you expect these things to kind of be done by? And then have we given enough runway to really do this thing properly? That's one thing I assess. And then another one is, I'd say, like you said, value is, I think one of the things that we as an industry should kind of all work on, sales strategy and operations professionals, I think it's kind of communicating the value of what it is that we're doing. Having something like an accurate account score is incredibly important for an organization. I've seen folks use it for things like quota planning, territory planning, to even come up with some general go-to-market, which markets we want to go after, how we're doing versus our competitors. This can be very, very valuable. It could be the basis of a lot of other things. So, understanding their understanding of the value proposition is important as well, because at the end of the day, we're building a relationship with this customer. We're making them our stakeholder. We want to make sure that they're happy. So, what's important to them, and making sure that what we can offer is aligned with their values and, what's important to them as well. So those are two things I kind of really pivot a lot on, is the kind of the timeline and the value that they're looking for.
So from a timeline perspective, how much timeline do you think is in, you would say, if somebody said, I'm entering a new carving process in, say, September, right?
Yeah.
Is that now like looking at middle of July? Is that enough time, or do you think how much time do you think people should devote for at least getting the Rev 1 out?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think that's actually what a lot of customers are kind of telling me now. It's like, hey, like our planning process is going to start. Is kind of enough lead time to get this done. And it's really about managing expectations, right? So if you're doing that, for example, in the first go around, you should kind of expect to have directionally accurate predictions. But I wouldn't want to use it for things like necessarily like quota planning, because it can be very difficult to kind of align that with expectations. You need to kind of give this thing some time to allow reps, several months of feedback to say this was good and generally being accepted. So if it's an abbreviated timeline in terms of months, then it can be used for things like territory planning, where you have hundreds of accounts potentially in a territory. And so kind of directionally accurate is going to be good enough or great, to be able to produce that. But if you're trying to, for things like quota planning, which tends to be, it's tied to compensation, it's a lot more emotional, then I think for something like that, you have to be, give it a little bit more time than probably at least two or 3 quarters would be what would be ideal for something like that. So it depends on the intentions and what is going to be used for. Really it's getting started is the most important step, because these, for the most part, like it's our product, as we go through this process, it's a learning process. Machine learning is actually learning, and it gets better and better over time. So the longer you run it, then the better the results will become.
I think that's a great segue to the other piece that we kind of glossed over, right? We focused this discussion on account scoring for territory planning, but it's beyond just territory planning, right? Because you use it for territory planning, you use it for quota planning, you use it to make decisions related to coverage of roles, right? Like are we putting a marketing person or CSM person, right? All those things are tied to how we can do scoring, right? Uh, is there a metric or a set of metrics that you recommend? Because, like you said, right, we can when we get into this planning phase, some people bring up with so many metrics, like we talked about earlier, it almost leads to a paralysis of sorts, right? So, are there a set of metrics that you recommend people should look at?
That's a good point. Like I said, yeah, I definitely experienced the whole paralysis by like over analysis type of thing, where we doing territory planning. We had number of customers, number of prospects, the spend by certain industry, pipeline that's happening in the space. So it just really it can be overwhelming, I would say, for folks. Again, I'd kind of go back to the whole simplify piece, right? And what I've seen is important is, you want to kind of come up with a singular metric, and it has to be your own. For us, we create potential. We do it in dollars. I think that's also important because that's kind of a controversial decision because dollars can be very emotional. You can say, hey, this looks accurate or not. If you kind of do it where it's an arbitrary number, and it's really about the relative measure, it maybe does capture our intention, but at the end of the day, it's not really catering to the end user where they think about dollars. They're saying, how much can I close from this account so I can retire quota, right? So to me, my vote will always be to have a singular metric that is dollars, that says, here is what I can expect from it. And it needs to be formulated for your business. It needs to kind of look at what you do, look at your products, depending on how many products suite are in your suite, then you can kind of cater to that. But so I would say simplifying it to a dollar metric and using that would be important. And then even in terms of, I think I was going to say this is more kind of for territory planning, but that's one of the uses for account scoring, is really being clear about your design principles, right? Like, what do we actually want to produce out there? And I've done a lot of territory planning in my time, and some of the managers have one of the ones that's really, really famous is called like the pizza pie approach, where if you're like, carving up San Francisco Bay Area, there's a lot of big areas, and then other portions of the area are more rural. So the pizza pie approach says, you give each of the reps a little bit of a downtown of a big city, metropolitan, and then you give them another piece that is more rural patches, right? So again, coming back to it in terms of metric, I would say simplifying and coming back to a dollar value that is, formulated for your business. And then when it comes to territory planning, it's really capturing the intention of the manager or the stakeholder that you're supporting, because they know how to manage their property. They know it's more fair or equitable. And so what's important there is really capturing their intention and being clear about the design philosophy that you have.
So what you're saying is a number, a dollar value, which is like the bookings potential or some sort of revenue potential number, is a good one to anchor on, because you can, at the end of the day, that's the unifying factor, right? Whether we are in the business of making money, so the company wants to allocate based on revenue, and reps want to look at revenue as a number to say, where do I retire quota? And so the potential part becomes the single, I would say, metric that we should sort of look at.
Yeah, and I think just to add that, even any good metric needs to flow from the top to the bottom, right? And both ways. So like, if you did some kind of arbitrary number, it's not going to be easy to understand it intuitively. But dollars is something that a singular sales rep cares about and the topmost executive cares about. It's something that flows, from the top to the bottom. So that's going to be one of the design kind of things that's important, is to come up with a metric that's singular, that's probably dollars. That's my vote always. And then, kind of catering it to the business that you have in hand. It's looking at your product and making sure that it's speaking to your past performance there.
Okay. So shifting gears a little bit on the communication of the scores, right? So we in sales strategy and sales operations, we spend a lot of time with analytical people. We'll come out of the score, we'll do all the right things to do it, and then we present it to our sales leadership, right? And sales leadership are responsible for making sure the reps are productive, and
Mhm.
they're listening to the feedback from the reps. And so there's a little bit of hesitation that I've seen in these things. Not, I wouldn't say hesitation, but cynicism when they look at the score, because they're like, I don't know what you guys in the back room are, figuring it out. My field here has all these opinions on this. They don't trust it, whatever it is. So, are there any recommendations that you've seen in helping bridge that communication gap? What would you tell a sales strategy team? This is how the best way to sort of build a case to communicate to senior leadership to adopt scoring, because if they don't adopt it, if they don't buy into the score, then all bets are off. And then enforcing the reps to actually trust the score in some ways. I would say not enforce. You can't really enforce. It's more of recommending them.
Aligning them, I
Yeah.
guess. Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. I think that's something that I've made that mistake in my career where we don't spend enough time in communicating the value of what we're doing, right? So I certainly agree that probably one of the most important things is how you communicate it. I think for that, I would just always say like up level the conversation, right? So it's not about really our kind of time savings as sales ops or sales strategy folks. It's not about cost savings. It's more about a value that you present in doing that. And if you can kind of articulate that, you know, the difference between poorly designed territories and well-designed territories, and the impact that it has in terms of value to the business, in terms of dollars, that then you've won, right? And the mistake I made in the past is like I remember when I first did this regression, I was explaining to a very non-technical audience a binomial regression, right? And saying, hey, this is what we did. We did a snapshot, and ones or zeros is binomial, and quickly like nerded out, and they didn't really follow what I was doing there. And I think kind of adjusting from that and saying, hey, look, what we're doing, it's like a rear view mirror. We're able to see what we've done in the past and use that to adjust our understanding of what we're seeing in the road ahead, right? And being able to kind of up level the conversation and saying, hey, this is really important because it's already difficult enough to close business and to kind of be successful and manage your territories and your sales reps in this manner, right? So what we're doing is we're using the best of kind of analytics to help you to do that. And I think one of the models I had for the team, I was telling them, we don't want to be like Vincent van Gogh, very successful, but not during his time because he couldn't articulate that value. You think about Picasso, he was extremely popular during his time, and so there is something to be said there that you want to be appreciated, obviously, for when you're doing things as you're doing them, because then you are being valued properly in your life. And so, I think visualization is extremely important. One of the things we try to do is we have two metrics. We have potential and probability. We use that to be able to plot your accounts visually. And I think for the territory planning, being able to show it on a map is really important. Being able to have dashboards that kind of feed into it, where you're looking at it real time. These are really important ways to kind of communicate what it is that sales strategy and operations folks do. And without that communication, then we're not really valued properly. And I've learned, I've supported different sizes of organizations, large ones to big ones in their formative years. And I definitely have a high respect to this field. And I would encourage all of us to just kind of really focus a lot on how we communicate what it is that we're doing and the importance of something like an account score or equitable and fair territory plans. I've seen a huge difference in doing that.
Yeah, no, I agree. Equitable and fair. I think we'll conclude on that because it has to be equitable, it has to be fair, it has to be tied to the single metric that we ties all the organization, which is revenue in this case. And then it's also about allocating the right resource, right? So you could have a very rich territory, great potential, but you have a ramping guy who will take 6 months to ramp, right? So how do you balance and figure all those things? That's how we put in the right person on the right territory, and are we having the right accounts in the right pocket, and are we able to sort of monetize the most effectively? So I think, yeah, all those things are there, and it's not a simple thing that you can just pull a score. It has to be done collaboratively. It's a balance of machine learning and human intelligence as you do sort of build it in. So no, thank you, Noor. I think this has been a great discussion, and we look forward to working together.
Awesome. Thank you.
Take care. Thanks.
Bye.